Hello and welcome back to Speak. I am so excited because we have gone transatlantic. The Americans are in the room. Yes. So excited. I'm going to hand over to you, Laynnea, and give us a bit of an intro about yourself and Kristi and what you're here to speak about.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us on here. So my name is Laynnea Myles, and I've been in the environmental health and safety arena for over 20 years. Man, time does go by fast, but they say when you're having fun. And so throughout my career and throughout my journey, I've been in the cosmetics industry. I've been in the industry where I dealt with EHS with missile heads, which is interesting.
Nice. Very cool.
Also, yeah, and also on another side with logistics and manufacturing. So really has some different experiences. And the one thing throughout my journey is that regardless of where you are and globally, internationally, everyone wants to keep people safe. And so that is one of the things that is I'm very passionate about. And before I give it over to Kristi, one of the things that we we really want to talk about is the allyship and advocacy, in particular for women. And in this space where it has been quoted and heard that it's male and pale
And stale.
and stale. Thanks for having that. And so is allyship and advocacy and resilience can mean so much. And so I am excited, and I know Kristi is excited, but I'm not going to steal her thunder. But that's just a little snippet of me, and I'll let Kristi introduce herself.
Okay, hi, I'm Kristi McClure, and I work at HSI. And my colleague Jill James, who we would have loved to have joined us, but she's busy presenting at a conference, is not here. So I think I'm sort of
And
filling
Monique, I
in.
know,
And
yeah.
Monique, I know. And so part of how we all got together was we pulled together this great presentation that we did at a conference last year on women in safety and allyship and everything that Laynnea is speaking of. And we sent out a survey to, sort of put it out there in the world, emailed it out to a few different publications and folks that have a good list of safety professionals, probably more United States than international. And we were just pleasantly surprised by how many responses we got. And so we had all this data and all this information on, we think we almost got 870 responses.
Wow.
So
Yes.
it was in, I mean, I can speak more in terms of the details of the survey and some of the stuff we got out of it, but it was just fascinating and very much informed, and I think changed a bit of what we decided to talk about at this panel session that we did on women in safety. And the session itself and the feedback from folks was just really eye-opening and interesting. On the survey, we made it as fast and easy as we really want to get a lot of responses, a lot of information. So most of it was, click the box. What are the top things? This, that, and the other. And then an open-ended. Is there anything else you want to share? And that was, God, I think we got almost 300 open-ended.
Yeah.
Some people sharing
And
very personal stories of things they experienced. Yeah. Wide variety of, I think this is great. Thank you. I wish we wouldn't have surveys like this. You're just highlighting the problem. There wouldn't be an issue with women versus men
yeah.
if you just didn't talk about it.
Don't talk about it.
Talk about it.
Yeah. It was very eye-opening. Yeah.
Yeah. So
the thing that you guys are coming on to speak about is this sort of the survey that you did, the data behind that. But I think you just took us like one step back of where this came from. So you had a panel, it was about women in safety. And so so you decided just to make it a bit more interactive, or so what brought you to the survey? Why do it?
well, we wanted to bring data and information to the session is we have these three women I moderated, and these three experts that had what combined, you guys have over 60 years or
60
something
years.
of
Yeah, over 60 years.
more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, more.
So not just answering questions and speaking to your own personal experience, but what do we know about women in safety in the profession in this industry? And so you start looking and you start searching, and most of what comes up is PPE not fitting a female body,
Mm.
and that's the biggest issue. And we thought, yeah, I think there may be more, maybe other
Yeah.
things to talk about
Yeah.
than I can't get PPE to fit a female body. I have to get a male small or something.
Mm.
So we thought this survey would be great. We can send it out, see what we get, have it be fodder for this presentation. And then we sent it out, and then we got a lot, and it
A
became the
lot. And what
presentation.
exactly? And one of the things is that we really wanted to be interactive, and we didn't want to just, death by PowerPoint. And how can we really validate what we're speaking about? Yes, we have our personal experience, and this survey, and when we were thinking about a survey, we really spent some time regarding the questions we wanted to ask. There's so many questions we could have asked, but we really wanted to narrow it down and to really get an idea of what women are saying. What is it that they feel about being in this profession? And it was, like I said, it was very eye-opening, in particular, to have so many open comments. A lot of times when you have surveys, right, you answer the questions, and then when it comes to the comment part, what do? Sometimes you don't. I barely put anything. All right, I'm done with this. So the fact that we had so many comments, and it really, for me, made me think about, wow, reading these comments, like, this is something that other women really are very appreciative of,
Mm.
that someone is actually doing this. The fact that they actually took time not only to take it, but to put comments and notes regarding it, whether good, bad, indifferent, whatever it is, they still voiced their opinion, and their opinion matters, whatever it was.
Yep, space was made for them, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
them to say, I don't want this, or it matters
Mhm.
to me more than anything, space was made. I think that's awesome. So what were your major insights? What were the things that you found out through this survey that just sort of, what did you learn?
Yeah. So one of the things that I would say that I learned was really the point of women. They during the polling, and it was really, okay, yes, I feel like I'm supported by women, but then on the other hand, it's like, well, I'm not supported by women.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it was just like, okay, we do that. And do you feel like you're being supported at work? Yes, yes, I am. But then it's like, no, I'm not being supported. And to see that some of the experiences were that we think about other men. It is men not supporting women, but we also found that there were also women not supporting other women.
Mm.
And to what Kristi kind of alluded to earlier, we had a woman said that surveys like this doesn't help women. So doing a survey asking about advocacy and how are you feeling in this space, do you feel like you're supported, was actually looked at negatively, which we didn't think of doing, that it in any way was
Okay.
perceived as being negative.
Yeah.
And so that was really, for me, a moment of wow. But then I also looked back into my own scenarios where I thought, well, you know what? Sometimes it is women that are more harsh on me than
Mm.
men.
Yeah.
And then when you get to, even as you grow in your career, where again, there's not that many women in this space. So now women feel like they have to compete against each other
Right.
instead of, you know what, okay, let's help support. If I don't make it and you do, yes, it's okay. Regardless, at least there's success in reaching back. So yeah, that was one of the things that was eye-opening for me, and I'll let Kristi if she had anything else.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest is we asked them separate from each other. So we only had a handful of
Yeah.
questions, but one of them was, have you ever felt undermined or unsupported by females at work? And almost 50%, it was 46% said yes. So at some point I felt undermined or unsupported. And then towards the end of the survey, the question was, do you support the growth of other women? You know, whether it's formal or
Oh,
informal,
yeah.
but do you support the growth of other women? Just about everybody said yes.
Of course they did.
92%.
Yes.
So
Like,
we
Mm.
now
I don't believe them.
I'm probably a little bit of an optimist in some regards. I'd like to think that this is accidental, that we genuinely think we're in it for each other. We want to support the growth of each other, especially in a male dominated industry. We're sort of looking out for each other. But then inadvertently, whether it's a comment in a meeting or something said to someone else or something you do, you end up accidentally completely undermining this female that you care about and want them to grow. So I thought that was fascinating. We had asked one that we guessed we thought this would, I think going into it, do you feel your voice is heard in meetings? That, that experience we've all had of I'm giving this great idea and saying something and sort of getting talked over or completely ignored. And then a man says the exact same thing. And lo and behold,
What a great
the earth,
idea.
the earth shall stop.
Oh, that was wonderful. I
Um,
just said that 2 minutes ago.
right.
Good job, Brad.
We're doing what now? And so much of our survey respondents were skewed to leadership. We had a majority were definitely had been in it for a while, or do you hold a leadership position was one of our questions. A good number said yes. I, of course, have it in front of me looking at the data because I'm one of those sorts of people. So we did have a lot more that were leaders in the profession, over about 75-ish. But so you're a leader, but 72% said absolutely, I've had that experience of just being talked right over. And some of the comments were that there were some really, sad yet interesting stories of, I'm being ignored and they're deferring to the male next to me. And the male is saying, actually, that's my boss. You should be asking her these questions.
I wonder as well how much, I mean, as you were saying about being spoken over, I was thinking I turn that microaggression into humor because I need to address it in the room, but I don't want to be aggressive or seen to be aggressive in the room. So, let's just say Bob says exactly what I said 2 seconds ago. I am really now well trained at going, oh my God, it's like someone said it like a minute ago. And then everyone, it's enough to break it. It's not aggressive. It's wildly sarcastic. It's funny, but I'm like, I'm not letting it slide. I can't. And I think sometimes I wonder whether that is a very, very good skill or whether that really undermines what I'm saying in that moment and doesn't allow anyone to learn from what just happened, because that is a microaggression.
Right.
It's just like, that's lovely, sweet, back of your mind, please sit down. And then somebody said, like you say, repeats the same thing and it's taken seriously. And I'm also thinking about this wicked girl that I won't say her name, Elisa, you'll know it's one of the Smashy Three. And I went for brunch once and we were talking about, she is, when I say incredible, she is like incredible, right? And she turned up for a meeting with a bunch of 50 plus, male middle-aged men, and she was leading the meeting. And somebody turned around to her and said, oh, well, I'll have a white coffee and I don't take any sugar. And then also turned to the next person and said, like, what are you having? And she said, I don't know why and fair play to her, she's ballsy as. She just went, I assume you're telling me this for information because I would also like a coffee and I'm here to run the meeting. And then sort of cut it dead. But the immediate in the moment of a single male in a room, especially someone that's around the age, late 20s, early 30s, it's that they are the help. It's demoralizing, actually. It's depressing. That we're still dealing with that now. And I tell you, the the one that I see most regularly, and I'm just starting to spot it, and I'm going to have to come up with a very sarcastic response to be dealing with this new one. But when agendas are running behind, men are given the full time, allowed to overrun. Typically, it gets to the female spots, and they say, "Could we
We wrap.
can we get some of that time back?"
A little faster.
It's just that moment of, oh, but you're so good, very sort of, but you're so good at sort of pulling that back. But is it that we're very good at articulating ourselves in a short space of time because we're not given the time, right? So we've got this skill down, or is it that our voice doesn't have as much room, and we're the ones naturally that get tapered?
Mhm.
So I wonder, I'm sort of observing it at the moment and trying to figure out how I feel about it, but it's an observation that's typically it's women on agendas that get to pull back the time. So that's interesting.
Yeah, no,
I
good
think it's
point.
also
Yeah.
when we had shifted in our session and talking about the advocacy part and allyship
Yeah.
and being in a room and being aware of something like that, that this idea gets said by the male after the female has said it, maybe differently. And for you as an ally, whether you're male or female, to say, hang on a second, I actually think that Crystal said that first. No offense to you,
Mhm.
Brad, but is that basically what she just said earlier? Correct me if I'm wrong. Just any other person in the room making that statement has a
Yeah.
huge impact. And when
Yeah.
we shifted to talking about that,
The
how
advocacy,
can you be
yeah.
a good advocate? How do you be a good ally to somebody
Mhm.
who's sort of being trodden upon at work for
Mhm.
some unrelated reason? Age, I think, is another one. You see it with ageism when you're young and new to your profession. Oh, you don't have anything of value to contribute.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet who's going to be kicking our butts in technology, AI? But it's
Yeah.
absolutely going to be everyone that's coming fresh out of their teens and going to be kicking our butts, right? So they have so much value. Everybody does.
No,
absolutely.
that advocacy part is very important because we don't do it enough,
Yeah.
honestly. And Crystal, you mentioned the way you said it, being sarcastic, but just imagine how would that make you feel, like Kristi said, if someone else in the room mentioned that? Like, in particular, even if even if it wasn't a woman, if it was a male to say that, just imagine how much power in the dynamic. Not to say a man has more power, but just how the room sometimes is. Then in
Right.
that moment, it was like, oh, or if someone who said to the woman, no, she's not doing coffee. Can't you see that why would you do that? But people don't want to do that. But if people, and I feel like this new generation, they're not taking anything.
Yeah.
They're speaking.
I
They're
actually
speaking
cannot
up and
wait.
speaking up.
I
Yeah.
agree. I live with a few of the next generation, and they are very,
They are
very,
speaking up and speaking out, and if they don't like it, I'm going on to the next job.
yeah,
Whereas, some of us who have been in the industry and I have to admit, I was like that when I first started because you didn't want to get blackballed, or you don't want to be judged, and you want your career to progress, and sometimes you just took whatever, okay, but that's why I said sometimes it's easier to tell someone, oh, you don't have to do that, but you just don't understand how it was when you first got your feet wet inside of the field. And as I grew and progressed in my career, I said, you know what? I'm going to be my true self. This is me. Why should I have to change? And I was in a meeting and I didn't say anything. And then I was asked, Laynnea, you're so quiet. Why haven't you said anything? And I said, because I've said this several times and it's not worth my time to repeat it again. And so just by me saying that, it was like, you know what, you're right. We should. And so sometimes we don't even have to say anything.
Yeah.
In those moments, and to really stand up for ourselves when we don't have someone that is going to be in the room advocating for us? How do we advocate for ourselves when it's, you know what, it is okay for me not for me to be silent, and sometimes my silence is not weakness. And
Yeah.
so just understanding that in that space sometimes.
I think one of my favorite phrases at the moment is no response is a response,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then your body language too, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm choosing not to say anything because my response is I'm done repeating myself. This
Yeah.
is my response. My response is you're not valuing my words, so I will not give them to you. Right.
And my face is my response. My eyebrow has hit the ceiling. That is like, there you go. Not having it.
That's also another phrase that I love is it doesn't matter what I say, my face tells the truth, right? We're just like,
And you know what? That is a good point. And we've talked about this, and you hear the saying, oh, women, you wear your emotions on your sleeve. That's why you're not promoted. That's why you're not in this executive position and so forth. Men show emotions just as well.
yeah.
Like, it's this whole women being too emotional thing sends me into fucking
Oh,
orbit because
yes.
I mean, look at the state of the world. And who did that? Wasn't us.
It wasn't
Was not
us.
us.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, that is true, because and then what happens is that a woman doesn't wear her emotions on her sleeve, and so, or if you're too stern, or if you curse, or if you don't swear, or oh, you have to talk like the men and you have to do what they, that was one of the things that someone said, is that
Yeah.
you need to act like a man, and if you want to, yes, you have to act like a man in the workspace, and if you want to be recognized, why
Do you
why
know,
can't I be like myself?
it was one of the trickiest questions I've ever had to answer because there's the truth and then there is what's right, and they're not the same thing, right, sometimes. And it was a Women's International Day, and we were talking about impersonating men, about so basically there was a young lady in the crowd that said, does it pay dividends to impersonate men? Now, up until where I work now, for 19 of my 21 years, I worked solely in male-dominated industries, and I absolutely saw the only women at the top had completely impersonated everybody they wanted to step into the shoes of. And where I was then was no exception. And I wanted so desperately, I've got a real bad problem. I can't lie. I just can't do it. It makes me feel a bit ill. And so she said, does it pay? And I said, right, I'm going to give you a really honest answer. And the honest answer is temporarily. Temporarily, you absolutely will be provided steps where there was a greased pole, because you are adapting yourself to fit into what somebody wants you to be so that you get to execute your potential. That's temporary. Once you get that position, which you deserved anyway, you then have a completely eroded sense of self. And for the rest of the time that you sit in that role, you cannot be you. You cannot be authentic. You will not be able to burst into tears because it's a bit much, because sometimes it is. And actually, you then suffer because you have not walked into that role as you. So will it get you the job? Probably. Will you then be able to absolutely be you in that role and be your best? Absolutely not. It's
Tell you that what's your one's name? Sheryl Sandberg, fucking lean in. She has a lot to answer for. That book of like lean in, and it's that thing of do what the men do. It's like that's not what leadership, and it's this thing of cookie cutter leadership is that those masculine attributes. Jesus, I can't even say it because it sticks.
Yes, I
Like,
can't say it.
I can't
Well,
even say it.
and it was a lot of the open comments spoke to this. Like we even highlighted it when we did this survey report of the dichotomy of you need to be more like a man, and the sort of, to be successful, embrace these qualities that are sort of considered male in quotes. However, a lot of other comments were talking about the value of what a female perspective brings, that when we talk about sort of embracing diversity, both, what's a male perspective in view and how I would do things, what's a female perspective, you don't want to lose sight of either one of them. And you know, sort of that authenticity and staying true to yourself that you were saying, Crystal, was something that women can bring to the field of safety and improve it. However, in order to be accepted, you know, a lot of the comments were, once I sort of got in with the crowd and my coworkers, you know, viewed me as a value, as one of theirs, you know, whether or not it was phrased as one of the guys, but that sort of, you know, concept, everything was easier and better and work was smoother because they value me and they see me as a peer and I'm in. And if I'm going to be authentic, there's so much I bring to safety as a female. But do you have to sacrifice in order to, you know, you have to sacrifice to get there? You know, and how does that fit into it all?
Some of the Brené Brown research, she has there's lots and lots of snippets of her saying this online, but through her research, one of her most surprising findings was that fitting in was the opposite of belonging. Have you seen this? So in her research around oh god, just like all of her emotional research essentially. Yeah, she said fitting in was the opposite of belonging, because fitting in means that you changed yourself to fit in a gap, as opposed to just a sense of belonging where you could be yourself there. I thought that blew my mind for several weeks, actually, just really pondering on the places where I felt like I fitted in, and that sense of like I've done it, but the it is changed. I am being more like somebody else so that I will be accepted. And I think it's really interesting, actually, because we box all these masculine traits up, and the bits that we struggle with, I think when I do lots of coaching with young women particularly, it's like finding your voice in the room. We're fed up of repeating it or being overlooked or overturned, and we say, well, you know, a man would do X. Well, actually, we need to feel welcome and valued in that room as we step in. We don't need to fight for it, and actually we will say more of what we know and feel, and we will absolutely improve the room. But it's absolutely about that, back to your point about allyship. As you walk in, you've got to know that you belong there, not that you fit in, so that you do have a valid voice and you can change things or challenge things. So yeah, that was just me going off on a tangent. Apologies. But
Something, it's a thing that keeps cropping into my mind when we're talking about, like, we'll say women in safety, and then it's like there was only, we'll say, I can't remember what percentages, but anyway, it's there's X percentage of women in the safety profession. And then if you take all the industries, like all the high risk industries, then so it's like the profession is male dominated, and then the industries that we're working in are also male dominated for the most part. It's almost
was this the thing that you sent
double
the
whammy
screenshot of? So women make up 22% of professionals who have certified safety qualifications, I think. And then more women enter the industry every year, but the number promoted to leadership roles is less than their male counterparts.
Less. And that is something that is, so, you know, for those who see me on video, see that I am not Caucasian. I am a Black female. I identify as Black. So it is even more, the number is really even smaller, more than. And so when you look at that makeup, this is why it's even more important for allyship and advocacy. And that's where that resilience come into play. Because as a woman and a woman of color, you know, it's always challenging. It's always challenging. And even when you talk about, you mentioned that the person was in like their 20s. So I get that a lot, my age. And so I can say, oh, I have 20 years of experience. Oh, but you look so young. But what does that have to do? Even if I was, what does that have to do with my quality of work?
Yes, right.
If I'm able to deliver and at a high level.
And why did it occur to you?
Yeah, and it's so, and even because my personality, you talk about acting like a male, and I'm always smiley. This is me. And so that doesn't mean, when you look at a culture in EHS culture, one of the things we talk about, we'll talk about is the Bradley curve. Okay, dependent to interdependent. And so if we're trying to have an interdependent culture, I want to be able to talk to my employees. I want to be able, how do I make things so engaging? And
Yeah.
so I'm telling you now, having a frown and yelling at people and be considered the safety cop is not going to do your safety culture any justice.
Amen to that.
And exactly. So just imagine, just because I am at a senior position doesn't mean that the way I present myself has to change. Now, okay, I cannot smile as much. I can't be jovial. I can't laugh at people. No, this is me, and this is how I choose to be. And I think sometimes when we look at senior leadership positions, sometimes the stereotype, you need someone that is refined. But what does refined look like? Because we want that, whatever your definition of refined, because my refinement is the way I am.
Yeah.
This is me. And that's one of the things that you see. If you know someone that will be great for this position, hey, let me reach out to Kristi. I know she'll be great for this position. Let me reach out to Elisa to see if she, not because, oh, well, she doesn't fit the box of, she's not a man. She smiles too much. She wears her emotional. You know what? I think I actually saw a tear come down her eye when someone told them that they had a death in the family. So you can't be relatable to people. So how do you actually gain that of the employees? How do you change the way things are done? Because knowing that when someone is home and they're going through something at home, it's not going to just shut off when they go to work.
Right.
They're going to bring that over to when they're at work. So how do you relate to someone and see these things? And when you talk about these senior positions, these leader positions, females, we're more of that nurturer, right? So we have that ability, not saying that a man can't, but we have that ability that if we see an employee who's always bubbly, and then when we see them, they're not themselves, let me talk to them to see what's wrong, to see what's going on, versus, you know what, I'm going to write them up. They're going to be on a performance improvement plan because they did this one thing wrong, when it's really not that, it's something else. That's where we come into play. That's when being a really great leader understands that and not just look at things for what face value.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think empathy is definitely in all the incredible leaders, actually male and female, calling it out. If there is somebody that is really fantastic, empathy is the prime skill.
Yeah.
Is I can see you from a mile away when you're okay and you're not, even if you are wearing a smile rather than smiling, I can see it. Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about two of the different comments that you guys made. One where I think Kristi, you were talking about there's also space for that male opinion coming in, and I was thinking about advocacy, feedback, the smiling, all these things coming together. And I sit with this problem statement about whether I received advocacy at some point that really helped me, or whether I received male feedback about my femaleness. So let me take you on a mini 3-minute journey. I am extremely enthusiastic about this profession, right? And I am even more enthusiastic when I see leadership in the round that's real. Like I get really turned on in my brain, right? It's fireworks, love it. And I will interact in those very senior spaces with a lot of enthusiasm, right? Like whooping. If it's virtual, there'll be lots of comments, lots of emojis, couple of GIFs. Like I'm in.
Jesus.
I'm like wearing the love, right? So loads of engagement, really enthusiastic. And a few months go by and I get taken aside by two people in the space of a week. And one person said, you need to be way less zealous. And that cut me quite horrendously and hurt my feelings. Second person takes me aside, both male. And one, he said, you're going to have to tone yourself down, right? You can't be doing this. And I just said, why? Like, what is it hurting, eroding, not bringing? What is it changing in the room that's negative? And this is really interesting. He said, oh God, it's not that it's doing anything to the room, it's that it's doing something to you. He said, you are about a month away from people putting money on, you're the first comment, you're the first smiley face, you're the first sickly sweet comment. You are going to be known as the woman that is entering these spaces, and then it's all just sweetness and light and roses, and it's not balanced. And actually you can't dial it down. And that still hurt me. I went home, I was like, what do I do? And I thought, well, I still feel this way. I still feel kisses and roses and gifts, like excitement when that stuff is going really well. And I thought to myself, well, actually, if the room doesn't appreciate that level of energy, then the room isn't going to get it. Doesn't mean I don't feel it. Doesn't make it invalid. But it just means actually, if I'm eroding the perception of me as a leader, forget what it's basically saying is you're making it about you being really fun and female rather than you being a really smashy leader. And I still, to this point, cannot work out whether that was somebody saying, I really don't want you to be known this way because I know that you can do so much more, or whether it was just massively condescending and sexist. I can't figure it out. But I would
really
say
could be either.
it could be either.
Really, but also it could be both.
Yes, it could be both. What I know is the decision I made was I would be more heartbroken if people put bets on me and didn't take me seriously as a leader because of the way I was presenting my enthusiasm. That would break my heart because I know how much I can bring. So maybe this is that piece. Maybe it's about fitting in as opposed to the belonging piece. Maybe that's what that is about. Actually, shall I dial that back a bit? But I'll say from the point of that feedback to, let's say, fast forward a year, game changing. Just from a career perspective, game changing.
As in what that you did you took the feedback on board, you dialed it back.
Yeah.
And
so I was still, but I basically gave myself something to consider, which is if my feedback comment something adds something to somebody else in the room, then it's for someone else. If I'm slamming it in there and it's not giving anything to anyone else, I'm actually doing it
for you.
Me. It's about me having my voice heard. I'm making space for myself, but it's not constructive. So what I figured is if I'm giving feedback and it's about applauding somebody else's work, applauding the effort, applauding strategy, whatever it is, make the space, take the space. If I'm not giving something to somebody else, what was I trying to do with that message? I was actually probably just trying to make myself feel better, find a place to express me. So I think the feedback could have done either, but I then operated with that rule, which is if I'm giving something to the room, celebrating somebody or a piece of work, give it. If it's actually about how I feel, me saying it out loud doesn't change how I feel. So I can just be that feeling. And from a career progression perspective, it was a very straight up trajectory from that point. So I think it could have been either, but I still to this day am baffled by it, but it was very good and worked. And maybe when I'm 90, I'll be angry, or maybe I'll be really happy about it. I'm not sure.
But I think the key part of that whole thing was what is it you saying, well, what does that do for the room?
Yeah.
So it's outcome based. So it's not about judging, am I right or wrong, or should I behave this way? Is what is it doing?
Yeah.
What's the outcome? What's it doing for me?
Yeah.
Is this furthering my career? Is this improving whatever it is my job is? And so on the one hand, you want to think about, is this working for me or not?
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
That's it. Perfect.
Is it working?
Yeah.
If it's not working, and so that's your judgment call, you took in the feedback and figured out how to apply this by really asking that question. The hard part is if you're in a structure where just being female is the thing that is, well, the femaleness is what's not working. So do I want to
Mhm.
adjust to fit a system or an environment at work?
Right.
You know, like on the one
Mhm.
hand, I want to advance and do well and all these other, measures of success from a work perspective, but also how do we influence and change the environment itself so
Mm,
that what's considered working is
yeah.
not this tiny little box. And what you were saying earlier, sort of, oh, being a leader means this. Like,
Mm,
does it though? Does it
Mhm.
always mean these 15 traits, or could it be
Yes.
10 of them and then these 5 that all these other people have?
All these other people, guys.
Yeah. And then you know what? And then, I would have liked to ask the team, honestly, hey, when I do this, how does that make you all feel? Does it add? And just because although one person may say something, that may not be how everyone else. And sometimes that one person can be the one who is the one, hey, did you notice that? No, I really didn't notice that, but maybe I'll stay, you know?
yeah.
So I like to ask things from a collective. And that's honestly one of the things that I do with my team. Even when I have one-on-ones with them, I ask them, what is it that I can do to help? What is it that I'm doing that is hurting?
Yeah.
And those are conversations that is important for us to grow. And everyone is different. Someone on in that team may like that because it may gives them like, okay, she sees me. And so that may not work for that person. Just like on my team, the way I communicate to everyone is not the same. I have to do it differently because one person is very direct. There's no other way, but I can't be as direct and stern with another person.
Yeah.
I have to make it more palatable. So I would be curious to, to see.
But I think that speaks
Yeah.
to, you have to have the ego strength to be able
Mhm.
to open that door up and say, listen,
Yeah.
I know that I'm good and I'm smart and, I'm contributing in a positive way. And along with that, not but, and
Yeah.
I could do
And
better. There's
Yeah.
tweaks, there's things that might be
yeah.
landing wrong, whether intentional or unintentional. And so, that the concept of psychological safety coming up more and more when we talk
Mhm.
about, um, how we do things at work. And so you as a leader putting that out there of the sort of, if you see something, say something, even if it's,
Yeah.
gosh, when you do this
Yeah.
type of stuff in a meeting, it's undermining me as a professional. I don't know
Yeah.
if you realize this, but there are times when you think it's rapport building and fun, and it actually is kind of cutting me off at the knees. Could we work on that? That's a hard conversation to have.
Yeah. And probably one of the most valuable conversations that you'll have, right?
Mm.
Yeah. And,
Absolutely.
and that's a good point that you brought up too, Chrissy, about psychological safety, because oftentimes when we think about psychological safety, we always think about it more for the employee. But what about the EHS profession?
Mm,
What about us? What about our psychological safety? And it is important and it matters as well.
yeah.
And so we're our field is more of giving to others so much. And sometimes we have to do like the airplane, we have to put on our own mask first before we help somebody else, because otherwise we're not going to be any good. Because every single thing that feedback, whatever it is, you know, it's going to pile up. And if we don't know how to navigate and handle it, then we're going to be on the opposite side of that spectrum where depressed and stressed, and then our attitude will change. Well, I changed myself for them. Now they're saying this, but really understanding the why.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you
Um,
for sharing.
no, yeah, what, it's just like, well, I've worked in 6 industries and unfortunately there's a lot to share. So
Yeah,
so much.
absolutely. Well, and something, when you started speaking and telling that story, Crystal, about sort of advocacy and these people coming to you and giving you feedback, pardon me. And one of the things, when we'd asked the question about, do you feel like you have an advocate at work, we kind of quantified it with someone who has your back or someone who speaks for you when you're not there.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so it's sort of, do I believe there's somebody that say behind closed doors, when a colleague or my boss or somebody else, and they're talking about an issue and I'm not there, or my name comes up, do they believe that I'm doing my best? Do they throw me under the bus? Do they advocate for me? Oh, I think Elisa would be great for that position. Like we were saying earlier, that aspect of advocacy is not necessarily happening in front of you. Is an advocate is somebody who's out there behind your back saying good things, or behind your back opening doors and opportunities for you. That's really that aspect of being an ally. Did someone else go to the person after the meeting and say, I don't know if you realize this, but you completely ignored this person
Yeah.
and gave way more weight to this other person. And you might not realize it, that you perceive something coming from a male as somehow having more, credence behind it and more strength.
And actually acknowledging that, that might not, that you're making sure that we don't frame that as an attack. It might be completely unconscious bias, but it's
Yes.
about waking people up to that and saying, naturally you lean to these people as opposed to, these people. So,
well, and if I feel like if you assume it's an unconscious bias and you assume it's ignorance versus willful, the feedback lands better. You're not sure
Yeah.
how someone's going to take it and where they're at from sort of an ego strength perspective, and if it's a big hit. I mean, your ability in the story you told of, wow, this is really hurting my feelings, and I need to take this in and think about it and digest it, and what does it mean here versus here, and how is this working for me, versus just, you've hurt my feelings. You're an insert expletive here.
I can insert no, I'll leave it.
I know you can. I'm trying to just kind of verbal volleyball this for you. Just
on that note, I'm just conscious of time. So if we could kind of, I suppose, do a whip around, what are our, I suppose, thoughts at the end of the conversation, or points that we'd like to leave with listeners. I really like that point. I'm just going to start. I really like the point Kristi made about, like, who are your allies, who are advocating for you in the workplace, and who you can do that for as well, I suppose, as a shout out. And I know we definitely have a couple of fellas who listen to this who are unbelievable allies. They're great. They're great advocates. So it's Peter Jenkins and Stuart Hughes. And actually, to a point where, very briefly, somebody I think we had posted about something, and Peter came under and left a comment on LinkedIn. It was like, this is really interesting, and and somebody else commented inviting him onto a podcast to speak about it, and he was like, no, just speak to the two women there that originally made the point.
Phenomenal guy.
He's an ally. So, but anyway,
that's good.
Yeah, amazing. In terms of my thoughts, I think incredible that you guys had this opportunity that could have just been like roll up, sit on stage, do a standard panel, but to really bring insight that others can share, learn from, to trigger these conversations about, as you say, Elisa, who am I? My big question is, who am I advocating for? If everybody just looked at that and said, who are like the 3 people that I'm just like, oh, totally undervalued, need to open all that. I mean, Elisa, I will say Elisa's name in every room I walk into, along with a whole load of other women. I think it's my absolute duty to be able to look at incredible women and share that prime talent in as many places as possible. But one of the other things that I was thinking when I was looking at some of your bullet points from your the paper or the report that went out was around the women coming into the profession, level of competency, that massive dilution of male around this female talent. And one of the things that popped into my mind was every presentation that I do is I say that I am a fellow member of the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, but I only do that because only 1% of women, 1% of fellows in the world are women. And I'm like, if you have a statistic like that, something's broken. That if 99% of the fellows in the world are men, you don't have a system that is inviting women, enabling them either. So I think one of these things is for the institutions that are clearly having the metrics and seeing that there's a disbalance between male and female levels of formal competency recognition certification. It's, I think now we need to start doing something now. So that was massively on my mind, and I loved that the bullet points for your report triggered that thought in me. So not just people, but institutions can see start making moves. So that was my thought.
No, it's important. And we don't speak about it enough. And sometimes if you speak about it, like, oh, here she goes, wants to save the world. Yeah. But we have to continue to speak about it. And I like the example that you gave that mentioned the allyship and support, saying, hey, you know, these are the women that said that, because it is important, because there are many men in those spaces, right? So they need to be the ones as well to say, you know what? Who don't I see in here? We talk about that a lot in conversations. Who don't I see in this room? It's a whole bunch of males. And that's whether you're recruiting for positions. And we tend to do that even for jobs. Okay, let's recruit from the Ivy League schools or the top schools, as if those who weren't able to go there, maybe they didn't want to go to an Ivy League school. Maybe they couldn't afford it. Maybe they went to a junior college or a college or university that's not well known. That does not discredit them. And it's us as a society who do that and make people feel like they're not valuable. And this is why it's important for us, again, to really reach back and to see who can we pull in. And you know what? This school, we don't reach out to them. I know they have a safety program. I'm gonna reach out to them. And we have to start it. You know what? I'm gonna submit that person for that award because I don't see enough representation. And representation matters, because once you're recognized and there's representation, someone who looks like you, and it makes you say, oh, wow, then someone else feels like that. And that's something that I don't think we do enough. We'll see, oh, they added another woman onto that. Yay, okay, now that's it. We met the quota. But check that box. And speaking of that, that is something that us, even as women, we do. We don't apply for different things or even jobs or even for awards because we feel like we don't meet every single box. But men, they don't have to meet anything. They'll submit. I'm going to apply for 100 jobs. And I don't have to have anything.
Have you heard of the sticky floor, glass ceiling? There's glass ceiling and sticky floor for women. So men typically only have to satisfy 30% of a job description before they'll apply. Women, it's 80%. So they say there's a glass ceiling that we can't get past because of everything else, but we stick ourselves to the floor because we have such a high bar. So no sticky floors, ladies.
No sticky floors.
If you see the job description, just apply. Doesn't matter if you haven't done it before.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you know your thing about the I'm gonna have to say this, right? The quota of like putting so many women in the piles so that you interview right. I have said this, I think, a couple of times on this podcast, but if we have to start somewhere, is it not by at least opening the door? And I say this because I was definitely stuck in my big, from middle career to senior leadership, I was a gender call, and I was told that later in the pack. I was a cleaner. I never went to university. I did all the things and I just worked my way through. And I was a gender call in the pack.
Can I just say though, in terms of quotas, I would say very, very rarely is somebody just because they're gender. Like, you have to still meet all the men. You have to be super qualified and fucking great at your job to then go in to meet a quota.
People, I was all those things.
I'm sure you were. But like, people make out that like, oh, I'm just going to go out onto the street and pick the first woman I see. Look, they're just putting women in. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, that's not what's happening.
No.
Like, yes.
Anyway,
that is so true. It's not like this. Oh, well, no. Well, you still have to be something.
Yeah. And I think it's if you've automatically, through your bias, sifted the women out, and someone's like, dude,
sit them back in.
Sit them back in.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the again, it was one of those moments where I'm like, laugh or cry. I was told what a surprise it was when I turned up for the interview, and they were like not even going to pay attention because it was, you know, it's just like, oh, we've put somebody from a poor background in, yay, it's a woman, tick tick.
Yeah.
And then walked in, they were like, oh shit, okay, we're probably gonna have to employ her now. But if they hadn't sifted me back in, I wouldn't have ever got in the room. And it's so yeah, it's mad, isn't it? So even if it's people are forcing us into the rooms, opening those doors, it's then for us to ensure we're applying for the jobs, right?
Yes.
Sticky
Yeah.
floors. And then we turn up and we really advocate for ourselves and our talent in that
Yeah.
room. No holds barred. Like, go and get the job, take it. It's mine.
Right.
Well, even the
Kristi,
research.
we're jumping to
Sorry.
Kristi now, and you take it. But yeah, kind of wrap up thoughts. I'm conscious of time, but
Okay.
Oh, it is.
Well, no, I was going to say to piggyback
Good.
that is that even the research shows that, you know, companies that have diverse leadership, you have a lot of different ages, ethnicities, experiences, etc. Not everyone's Ivy League, just all those different things that come together. You are more innovative. You can adjust to the changes in the industry and the economy. I mean, you do better as a company when you've got diversity amongst your leadership.
Yeah.
And so, if all things being equal, back to that, who's not in the room,
Yeah.
we should enhance diversity, because in the long run, what does this do for us? What are the outcomes? It makes us a better company. We're more creative, we're more innovative. And you know, I was going to say sort of the sort of closing comments. One of the things that we had talked about that we haven't brought up yet today, of except for these three having such experience in the industry and how many years and all of that, is the women who have been in this for years and years, that you're in a position of power. I'm the senior whoever it is. If the word chief is in your title, or VP, you have an incredible amount of power. You actually can influence how things are. Someone who's brand new coming in, I don't want to rock the boat because I really need this job. They need you to be an advocate and to be an ally. They need you to, you're actually in a position to change the structure, and make some systemic changes, versus those that are coming up. So you think of, you know, the positive influence we talked earlier of the younger generation, and not taking anything.
Yeah.
But the people who've been in this for years, and they acknowledged in our survey, things have changed a lot. You know, you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you've been in this industry for 10, 15, 20 years. You can change a lot with your power if you choose to use it that way.
Or realize that you
Be
haven't.
the change you want to see. Yeah.
Oh, somebody famous said that.
with great power comes great responsibility, you guys.
Uncle Ben.
And on that note, I have to
The force
call
is
it.
with you.
Guys, thanks so much. It has been an absolute pleasure. And if you decide to do another survey, by all means, come back on and tell us about that too. I think you should do it.
And we should send it to you guys.
Yes.
Get a bit more across the pond and
Yeah.
in there.
Bring it. We
Brilliant.
will share it widely. So just give it.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks a million, and thanks to the listeners, and we will see you next time when we'll be chatting about something else. All right, see ya.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.